is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy
This is a spoken version of a 2-part video series I made a little while back. The videos were pretty long with a lot of reading, so I'm hoping that this format will make it a little less of a hassle to absorb all the information in it. This is my critique of Janice G Raymond's article entitled 10 Reasons for Not Legalizing Prostitution. In this article, she makes an argument against the legalization and decriminalization of sex work. While I agree with many of her points against legalization, she only uses one example of decriminalization. What the sex workers' rights movement is looking for is the complete decriminalization of consenting adult sex work. This has happened in 2 places, in New South Wales, Australia in 1995, and in New Zealand in 2003. In countries that have anti-pimping laws such as Sweden, Canada, and the US, anyone who is considered a third party can be charged under these laws. This can include drivers, brothel owners, receptionists, and bodyguards. But roommates, landlords, spouses, friends, and family can be potentially charged as well. These laws make sure the sex workers are even more stigmatized and divorces them from the rest of society. Decriminalization has a more pragmatic approach. Sex workers are able to work with each other, hire drivers, receptionists, and bodyguards, and have relationships without fear that the people that they care about will be treated like criminals. Sex traffickers, people who exploit children and adult sex slaves, and those who mistreat consenting adult sex workers are still seen as criminals and are treated as such under decriminalization. The trafficking of people is a very real issue, whether it be for sex slavery or otherwise. However, people who are migrant sex workers, that is, people who are consenting adults who want to be in the industry, are lumped in with those who were truly captured into sex slavery. These sex workers want to make better lives for themselves and their families. This often means working in more developed countries and those with more sex worker-friendly laws. Due to xenophobic immigration policies, these people will resort to using traffickers who will potentially mistreat them. Their voices have been completely drowned out by most anti-trafficking groups and governments. Quite a bit of research has been done directly with migrant sex workers, and there are sex workers who have been willingly trafficked on numerous occasions. They will be deported only to come back. Victims of trafficking and migrant sex workers alike are often treated not much better than criminals. Some of them are even locked up into prison. If the authorities are able to prosecute the traffickers, they will use the sex slaves and migrant sex workers to testify against them. Once the system is done with them, they are often just dumped back in their home countries. The New Zealand government-appointed Prostitution Law Committee report, the one that was released in December 2008, concluded that the number of sex workers have not increased since decriminalization. In New South Wales, there are reports of the numbers of sex workers increasing, decreasing, or staying the same since decriminalization. So to me, the jury is still debating this one. In Sweden, where sex workers have been decriminalized, but their clients and third parties are criminalized, there have been claims of increased numbers of street-based sex workers since the law was implemented in 1999. If most sex workers are truly in the industry only due to poverty, then the only way to lower the numbers is to combat poverty. To try to eradicate one more option for these folks is putting the cart before the horse. In New Zealand, the numbers of street-based sex workers have increased in some areas, while decreasing or staying the same in other areas since decriminalization. The areas that have higher numbers of outdoor sex workers also have some of the strictest zoning bylaws, making it harder for sex workers to move indoors. Overall, it has been reported that before and after decriminalization, the number of street-based sex workers remained at 11% for all of New Zealand as of December 2008. In New South Wales, sex worker organizations estimate that 1 to 2% of all consenting adult sex workers are street-based, while the legal authorities estimate 10 to 12%. These numbers will vary from different parts of the state. but overall it shows that the percentage of outdoor sex workers have either fallen or stayed about the same since decriminalization. Again, it should be noted that there have been a few reports stating that the percentage of outdoor sex workers have increased in Sweden since abolition was implemented in 1999. The majority of outdoor sex workers can be considered survival sex workers, living from hand to mouth. These issues here are clearly homelessness and poverty, as well as addictions in many cases. Of course, when people hear this, even the staunchest supporters of decriminalization are going to stop in their tracks. But is this true? In New Zealand, the legal age when someone can become a sex worker is 18. The government has reported that there has been no increase of exploited children on the streets, and there were less in brothels post-decriminalization. All the reports I have come across for New South Wales, Australia have not claimed an increase of child prostitution since decriminalization. It is unbelievably disgusting that someone would take such a serious issue and make equally serious claims without anything to back it up. People who resort to such dirty tactics should be ashamed of themselves. Unlike in Sweden, where sex workers are treated as infants, and in places such as Canada and the US where they're criminalized, the authorities in New South Wales and in New Zealand see consenting adult sex workers as business people. Because of this, sex workers are more likely to come forward if they have been mistreated. Sex workers can work together, again unlike Sweden, Canada, or the US. They can go to sex worker organizations for support, and they can demand better working conditions. Since decriminalization in New Zealand, sex workers feel it is much easier to refuse a service. Violent crimes such as rape and assault have decreased, while crimes such as stolen money have stayed about the same. Reporting crimes to the police have increased in some areas, while others have stayed about the same. Since decriminalization, more people are using the reporting services of sex worker advocacy organizations. Violent crimes against sex workers in New South Wales have also fallen, and sex workers are more likely to come forward to the police. In both New Zealand and New South Wales, there are sex workers who still do not want to approach the police when they are victims of crime, mostly because they do not feel like they will be taken seriously. They prefer to go to advocacy groups instead. As many anti-rape organizations can attest to, a low number of men and women who have been sexually assaulted report the crimes to the police. This is a problem that needs to be addressed for everyone, not just sex workers.